The weight of promises. The air in Khan Yunis was thick with dust and despair. Amani al-Haddad, 24, clutched a worn plastic jug as she stood in line at the makeshift water station. The sun beat down, relentless, baking the cracked earth beneath her sandals. Around her, children with hollow cheeks and eyes too old for their faces tugged at their mothers' skirts, their whimpers blending with the distant hum of drones. The line stretched endlessly, a human chain of exhaustion, waiting for a trickle of water that might not come today. Amani's stomach growled, a reminder of the single piece of flatbread she'd shared with her younger brother, Sami, that morning. The Hamas-run health ministry had reported 154 deaths from malnutrition since October 2023, 89 of them children. She pushed the statistic from her mind, it was too heavy, too real. Instead, she focused on the jug, its chipped rim a testament to months of scavenging. Just one more hour, she whispered to herself, though the words felt hollow. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a rare signal piercing the communication blackout. A message from her cousin in London, Amani, did you hear? UK's Starmer says they'll recognize Palestine at the UN in September if Israel agrees to a ceasefire. Could this change things? Amani's heart skipped, but hope was a dangerous thing in Gaza. She typed back, ceasefire? Israel won't agree. Netanyahu calls it rewarding terror. Nothing changes here. She hit send, but the message failed to deliver. The network was gone again. Nearby, a UN aid truck rumbled past, its tires kicking up more dust. Only 100 trucks had entered Gaza yesterday, far short of the 500 Starmer demanded. Amani's eyes followed the truck, knowing it wouldn't reach her neighborhood. The blockade tightened daily, and the Israeli military's claim of no restrictions felt like a cruel joke. She thought of her father, killed in an airstrike last year, and her mother, wasting away in a tent with no medicine. The world's outrage was loud. UN agencies called it man-made mass starvation, but outrage didn't fill empty stomachs. A boy in line fainted, his mother's wail cutting through the murmurs. Amani knelt beside them, offering her jug. Take it, she said, though it was empty. The mother's eyes met hers, a silent exchange of shared grief. Amani wondered if Starmer's announcement, bold as it sounded, would ever reach this dusty corner of Khan Yunis. Political promises were like mirages here, shimmering, distant, and always out of reach. The diplomat's dilemma. In London, Sarah Langley sat in her cramped office at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, staring at a draft of the UK's 8-point peace plan. The document was Starmer's brainchild, a roadmap to recognize Palestine unless Israel met conditions, a ceasefire, 500 aid trucks daily, no West Bank annexation, and a commitment to a two-state solution. Sarah, a junior diplomat tasked with briefing MPs, felt the weight of the plan's ambition, and its fragility. Her desk was cluttered with reports, 60,000 Palestinian deaths since October 2023, 50 hostages still held by Hamas, and a UN warning of famine unfolding in Gaza. Sarah's phone pinged with an email from her contact in Gaza, Amani al-Haddad, a young woman she'd met during a fact-finding mission in 2023. Amani's emails were rare, sent only when a signal broke through. Sarah, your PM's announcement is all over Al Jazeera, but it feels like a game. Israel won't stop, and Hamas won't disarm. We're starving here. What does Starmer's moment of maximum impact mean for us? Sarah's chest tightened. She'd promised Amani she'd advocate for Gaza, but the political complexities were suffocating. The announcement had sparked a firestorm. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it a reward for Hamas's monstrous terrorism, warning that a Palestinian state would threaten Britain itself. The U.S., through State Department official Tammy Bruce, labeled it a slap in the face to victims of Hamas's October 7, 2023, attack. Meanwhile, 255 Labour MPs, including Sarah's boss, Wes Streeting, demanded immediate recognition, arguing it was an inalienable right. The Liberal Democrats and Greens called Starmer's conditions a bargaining chip, while British-Israeli hostage Emily Damari, freed after 471 days, accused him of moral failure for risking legitimizing terror. Sarah rubbed her temples. Starmer's plan was a tightrope walk. Balancing domestic pressure, international alliances, and the moral imperative to act. She'd overheard a senior official say the conditions were deliberately stringent, knowing Israel's current government, opposed to a two-state solution, would likely reject them. Yet, Starmer insisted no one should have a veto over the UK's decision. Sarah wondered if this was courage or posturing. Her job was to sell the plan to skeptical MPs, but she couldn't shake Amani's words. What does this mean for us? She opened a new email to Amani, typing, "I'm pushing for more aid. Starmer's serious, but it's complicated. Hang in there." She hesitated, then deleted it. Empty promises wouldn't help Amani survive another day. The aid workers' burden. In a battered warehouse on the edge of Gaza City, Eli Cohen sorted through crates of expired canned goods. At 32, the Israeli aid worker had spent months navigating checkpoints to deliver supplies, but the blockade made it nearly impossible. His organization, Hope in Crisis, operated in a gray zone, tolerated by Israel but distrusted by Hamas. Eli's phone buzzed with a news alert: UK to recognize Palestine unless Israel agrees to ceasefire. He sighed, knowing the backlash would make his work harder. Eli's family in Tel Aviv called him naive, even traitorous, for aiding Palestinians while Hamas held hostages, including his cousin, Noah. Yet, he couldn't ignore the starvation he saw daily: children like 6-year-old Malik Saad, skeletal in a tent in western Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry reported 89 children dead from malnutrition, a number Eli knew was conservative. He'd seen the bodies himself, tiny and still, wrapped in threadbare blankets. Yesterday, he'd argued with an Israeli soldier at a checkpoint. "We're letting in 220 trucks," the soldier snapped. "What more do you want?" Eli pointed to the UN's demand for 500 trucks daily, but the soldier shrugged. "Orders are orders." Eli knew Israel's official line: no restrictions on aid, but the reality was different. Checkpoints, inspections, and airstrikes choked the flow. Starmer's demand for 500 trucks echoed Eli's own pleas, but he doubted it would sway Netanyahu's government. Eli's radio crackled. "Eli, we've got a problem," said his colleague, Noor, a Palestinian driver. "Hamas is diverting our truck to their warehouse." Eli cursed under his breath. Hamas's control over Gaza's aid distribution was another layer of the crisis. They claimed to protect the people, but Eli had seen their fighters hoard supplies for their tunnels. Starmer's demand that Hamas disarm and step aside was as unlikely as Israel's ceasefire. Both sides clung to power, and people like Malik paid the price. As Eli loaded a crate, he thought of Noah, still captive somewhere in Gaza's labyrinth. His work was a betrayal to some, a lifeline to others. Starmer's announcement, bold as it was, felt like a distant echo in this warehouse, where survival hinged on the next truck, not UN speeches. The crossroads. Amani's tent in Khan Yunis was a patchwork of tarp and hope. Sammy, her 12-year-old brother, sat cross-legged, sketching a bird on a scrap of cardboard. "It's a dove," he said, his voice soft. "For peace." Amani smiled, though her heart ached. Peace was a word thrown around by politicians, Starmer, Macron, Trump, but it felt like a fairy tale here. She'd heard rumors of a US-backed 60-day ceasefire proposal in Doha, but Hamas and Israel were at an impasse. Hamas demanded an end to the blockade, Israel demanded the hostages' release and Hamas's disarmament. Starmer's conditions mirrored this deadlock, placing recognition of Palestine in Israel's hands. Amani wondered if it was a genuine push for peace or a way to appease Labour's pro-Palestinian MPs without committing fully. Her phone buzzed again, no signal, just a saved photo from Sarah, taken during their meeting in 2023. Sarah, earnest and out of place in her neat blazer, had promised to amplify Gaza's voice. Amani had believed her then, but now, with 60,000 dead and famine creeping closer, trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. In London, Sarah prepared for a briefing with MPs. She'd memorized the talking points. The UK's recognition is a step toward a two-state solution, conditional on tangible progress. But the MPs' questions were predictable. Labour's left wing would demand immediate recognition, Conservatives would echo Netanyahu's line about rewarding terror. Sarah thought of Amani's email, the desperation in her words. She slipped a photo of Amani into her folder, a reminder of the human stakes beyond Westminster's debates. In Gaza, Eli faced a dilemma. Noor had confirmed Hamas's diversion of their truck. Without those supplies, a clinic in Rafah would run out of bandages by tomorrow. Eli considered confronting the Hamas fighters, but it was risky, they'd already threatened him once. He thought of Starmer's words, "No one should have a veto." If only it were that simple. Eli decided to negotiate, offering half the supplies to Hamas if they'd let the rest through. It was a compromise that gnawed at him, but survival demanded pragmatism. The breaking point. September loomed, and the UN General Assembly approached. In Khan Yunis, Amani heard gunfire in the distance, an Israeli raid, or maybe Hamas clashing with a rival faction. She and Sami hid in their tent, her arms around him as he clutched his dove sketch. The Hamas-run health ministry reported 112 deaths that day, 22 while chasing aid trucks. Amani's neighbor, a mother of 3, had been among them, crushed in a stampede for flour. Amani's phone finally caught a signal. An email from Sarah, "Amani, we're pushing for more aid. Starmer's meeting allies to finalize the plan. Hold on." Amani wanted to believe her, but the words felt like dust. She replied, "Sarah, people are dying now. Your plan is too late for us." She hit send, praying it would reach her. In London, Sarah faced a hostile Commons session. A Tory MP quoted Emily Damari, "This rewards terror." A Labour MP countered, "It's about justice for Palestinians." Sarah stuck to the script, emphasizing Starmer's conditions, but her voice wavered when she mentioned the 89 children dead from malnutrition. She saw Amani's face in her mind, her jug empty, her hope fading. In Gaza, Eli's negotiation with Hamas failed. The fighters took the entire truck, leaving him with nothing for the Rafah clinic. He drove back to the warehouse, passing a crowd of starving families. A girl, no older than Sami, held up a sign, "We are not numbers." Eli's eyes stung. He thought of Starmer's demand for 500 trucks, of Netanyahu's defiance, of Hamas's grip on Gaza. The political games were strangling them all. The moment of truth. On September 15, 2025, the UN General Assembly convened in New York. Starmer stood at the podium, his voice steady but heavy. "The UK will recognize Palestine as a state today," he declared, "because the conditions for peace have not been met. Israel's refusal to allow sufficient aid and commit to a two-state solution, and Hamas's refusal to release hostages and disarm, have left us no choice. This is not a reward for terror, nor a punishment for Israel. It is a step toward justice and peace." The chamber erupted, applause from some, protests from others. Amani watched on a flickering TV in a Gaza City cafe, the only place with power. Her heart raced. Recognition was symbolic, but it was something, a crack in the wall of indifference. She thought of Sami's dove, of her father's laughter, of the jug she'd filled that morning after hours in line. Sarah, in the UN gallery, felt a mix of pride and dread. The recognition was historic, but the backlash was immediate. Israel recalled its ambassador, the US issued a sharp rebuke. Labour MPs cheered, but Sarah knew Amani's reality wouldn't change overnight. She emailed her, it's done. We're fighting for more aid. Stay strong. Eli, back in Gaza, heard the news on his radio. He was unloading a rare aid truck. Only 120 arrived that day. Hamas fighters lingered nearby, eyeing the crates. Eli thought of Noah, still a hostage, and the clinic in Rafah, still empty. Starmer's speech was bold, but it didn't loosen the blockade or free his cousin. He handed a bandage to a nurse, who whispered, "Shukran." Eli nodded, his resolve hardening. He'd keep fighting, truck by truck. Amani, Sarah, and Eli never met, but their lives were tethered by a single moment, Starmer's announcement. For Amani, it was a spark of hope in a sea of loss. For Sarah, it was a career-defining gamble, fraught with compromise. For Eli, it was a distant promise, overshadowed by the daily grind of survival. In Khan Yunis, Sammy hung his dove sketch on the tent's wall. "It'll fly one day," he said. Amani nodded, though she knew peace was a long road. In London, Sarah drafted a new aid proposal, Amani's photo on her desk. In Gaza, Eli loaded another truck, knowing it might not reach its destination. The world watched as the UK's recognition rippled outward. France followed suit, then Germany. Netanyahu doubled down, Hamas issued threats, and the US wavered. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza persisted. 154 deaths from malnutrition became 200 by October. Yet, in the cracks of the conflict, small acts of defiance grew. Amani shared her water, Sarah fought for aid, Eli negotiated with shadows. The weight of promises was heavy, but so was the will to carry them. And somewhere, in a tent, a warehouse, or an office, the idea of peace, fragile as a dove, refused to die.